All right, planet Earth, you wanted the best, you got the best.
Hey, this is not a test. This is rock and roll.
Dave Erickson, Mark Anderson.
Locked and loaded.
When it comes to talk, they're the purveyors of power, the bailiffs of bombast, rock and roll renegades.
We're about to witness the greatest miracle of the machine age.
Turn it up to 11. Here they are, Mark and Dave. Let there be rock.
Yes, welcome everybody. You are witnesses to history, the premiere episode of Let There Be Rock, the first ever podcast. Dave Erickson,
Mark Anderson,
and we are ready to talk rock and roll. And as a disclaimer, if you're coming here looking for certain things, you're not going to find certain things. Right?
That's right. No religion.
No religion. This is like a John Lennon song. No religion, no politics, no left, no right, no conservative, no liberal, no Green Party, no libertarian, none of that. This is a place where we talk rock and roll. It's the one place where you can escape all of the noise.
This is the rock and roll party.
That's right. In the words of Ted Nugent, if anybody came here to get mellow, you can turn around and get out of here.
That's right. Because mellow is not the word here.
But you are witnesses to history, because one day this will be the podcast of record for rock and roll. I believe that.
I believe that too.
Right? I mean,
no doubt.
You know where you were when the Challenger exploded. You know where you were if you're old enough when Kennedy was shot. You know where you were when OJ was on the 405 in the white Bronco. You know where you are right now with the first broadcast of Let There Be Rock.
History is about to be made.
All right, Mark. All right. So our first episode, we've already got this sort of planned out each week, things that we want to talk about. And we're going to be talking about, it could be new releases. It could be the influences that bands have on other bands or on us, or news of the week, or whatever. But this first episode I know is kind of near and dear to our hearts.
Most definitely. It's going to be ACDC.
Well, there you go. The name of the broadcast is Let There Be Rock for a reason. And in my opinion, that is the name of AC/DC's greatest album, although we do disagree on that, but is without doubt the name of their greatest song. Right?
Yes.
All right. But I think on this first episode, Mark and I have decided that we want to talk about why AC/DC matters and the influence that AC/DC has had on rock and roll. They're often called a metal band. They're not even close to being a metal band.
No.
Although in the early days, I would argue that they were a combination of metal, punk, blues, straight Chuck Berry, thrash, sort of all mixed in and put together. We got messages coming in already, Mark. It's incredible.
So it's amazing. That didn't take long, did it?
2 minutes into the podcast. Look at that. We've got fans already contacting us. Let's see. Angus from England writes... Yeah, no. He's at his house. And even though this is taped, somehow he was able to hear it. No.
I may have told him.
You know, the thing about AC/DC, look, they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere. You know, these guys go on tour. You know, they started on New Year's Eve, 1973 at a club in Sydney, Australia. And just last year, or 2 years ago, whenever it was, they had the biggest tour in the world, highest grossing tour in the world, which I saw 4 dates on that tour, by the way.
Pretty cool.
Right. So the band has staying power, and whether you like that band or you don't, they are everywhere. You know who they are. And I think we need to go back and talk about kind of, you know, maybe what grabbed us and why they're so good. And I can tell you that I first heard this band. You and I were talking about this. You said that you heard them on record first.
Correct.
I saw them live in concert before they were famous first.
Which is even more cool.
They had toured America. They came out with a couple of albums. They released Powerage. I went to see Aerosmith. They got a slot because I guess what happened was they signed with the same management company that Aerosmith had. And that management company, Lieber Krebs, to try to get AC/DC some face time in front of bigger crowds, put them as the opening act on Aerosmith's tour that year in 78. And it was 3 bands. It was Aerosmith would headline, Journey, a fame Journey was in the middle, and then AC/DC had like a 40-minute slot. And I remember going to this gig, and I was a kid, and it was July 2nd, I think, 78. And this band comes out that I've never heard. I go, who are these guys? Somebody goes, ACDC or something? Oh, they opened with Live Wire. They went into Dog Eat Dog, and then they played them all. No, I think they went into Problem Child, then Dog Eat Dog, played them all. High Voltage, Let There Be Rock, TNT. I do remember the Jack, Rosie, Rocker.
Wow. That's quite the set list.
And Bad Boy Boogie. I think that was the set list, not in that order necessarily. I think they ended with Rocker. But I was like, oh my God, who are these guys? Unbelievable. They had this guy, this singer came out. Bon Scott was just charismatic as all get out. Then I remember telling my buds the next day, they were asking about Aerosmith. I said, forget about Aerosmith. They sucked. I said, this band that opened for them was unbelievable. They had this guitar player who looked like a wind-up doll. It's like they wound him up and he just went back and forth. He's like wearing these shorts and it was incredible. I'd never seen anything like it. Pure power, Mark.
It's great. I mean, especially back then when, Aerosmith was so huge, I'm sure that you were not even expecting that at all.
No, not at all. To this day, I can tell you, I remember almost every song that AC/DC played that day from 1978. I can't really tell you the order of Aerosmith songs. I just remember that this was the height of their drug usage. Oh. They were whipped. They were exhausted. It sounded like every knob was turned up to 10 on the mixer and the guy went home. It was awful. And had it not been for AC/DC, I'd have wanted my money back. After that, though, and we talk about grabbing onto a band, that band changed my life from that moment on because, look, I was just a white suburban kid, right? Middle America kid. Radio at the time for me, I didn't get a chance to hear the Ramones or, the Pistols or that whole punk movement or Iggy and the Stooges or anything like that. And so to see a band like AC/DC, which sort of had that combination of just pure power, and they had punk elements, but the pure sheer power, I was never exposed to anything remotely close to that. So that's what influenced and changed me. And the next day, I'm out buying Powerage. I'm looking for every import I could find. And of course, I found Dirty Deeds, which was just, AC/DC wasn't a clean bubblegum band.
No, they weren't. No. And then some songs were just right there in your face.
Yeah. So that was my experience. It changed me. And I've been an AC/DC fan ever since. And I know you didn't get a chance to see them live. I got the albums secondarily after the live gig, but you heard the album first.
Yeah. So what happened, I was a huge Kiss fan, and from like 75 on, and that was like the band I always listened to. One day I was on the school bus, and this kid always brought his boombox, and this day he had Back in Black. And I was like, what is that? And it was like, wow, this is so much different than what I've been listening to. So at that point, then my friend, like the next day, bought him vinyl. I'd go to his house every day after school, and we'd listen to AC/DC Back in Black. And then, sure enough, within a few months, that same guy with a boombox put on Highway to Hell, and then Dirty Deeds. And so I actually kind of became familiar with AC/DC on the school bus. And it was cool because at that point I kind of got away from Kiss because that was always a fun band, but a little more serious rock and with an edge, and like you said, like, what is that guy doing? He's like running around the stage like a crazy guy. I finally saw him in concert in 95, 96 on the Ball Breaker tour, and I was just blown away. I think one thing about seeing them live, the energy that they put out there, you can actually feel not just the vibrations from the instruments, but just the energy that they put out. It's really unique.
So there are those bands who have no idea that they've been influenced by AC/DC, right? But then you have the bands and the rock stars who absolutely know they've been influenced by AC/DC.
Maybe even a little, so much as, I would say, blatantly a ripoff.
Yeah, blatantly.
I mean,
all right. Well, first you have the legitimate ones. You have ones like Dave Grohl. I saw him in a concert where he stood up there in front of 30,000 people and talked about how he went down to see a midnight movie, AC/DC's concert movie called Let There Be Rock. And when he was a teenager, and he said that was the day he knew he was going to play rock and roll. Then you have Anthrax,
Exactly. Motley Crue.
Right. Scott Ian.
Right.
But Scott Ian has said, hey, I am a rhythm guitar player because of Malcolm Young. Then you talk about, I saw Sammy Hagar interview Tommy Lee. First question he has for him is, so when you were a kid, what band was it that made you want to play rock and roll? Tommy Lee from Motley Crue, if you don't know. But if you don't know that Tommy Lee's in Motley Crue, you really shouldn't be listening to this podcast. But anyway, he asked him, who was the band that influenced you to play rock and roll when you were a kid? Without hesitating. Oh, ACDC with Bon Scott. I think Motley Crue, you're talking about rip-off. It goes beyond just influence.
Well, yeah, it does. It does. You enlightened me not too long ago about a couple of things. I was like, huh. Then I checked it out. It's like, sure enough, it is like almost a lift.
Right. Well, all right. If you put on, I played for my girlfriend Livewire one time. No, I played her Let There Be Rock. It was the version of Let There Be Rock from the album If You Want Blood, the live album they did in the late 70s. And she goes, oh my gosh, that sounds exactly like Livewire from Motley Crue. So I pull up Livewire from Motley Crue and I play the first part of that version of Let There Be Rock. And it's the same stinking song.
Different lyrics, and that's about it.
Okay, so let's do this. We'll play a snippet of each, and then you guys can be the judge. Here is Let There Be Rock. Okay, that is Let There Be Rock, about as much of it as we can play without getting into trouble. So here now is Motley Crue's Livewire. And that is Motley Crue's Livewire. And if you don't think it sounds like AC/DC's Let There Be Rock, consider this. Livewire is also the name of a legendary song by AC/DC. What else? Dr. Feelgood. You like that song, right?
Well, yeah, most definitely. I love Motley Crue, so yes, I love Dr. Feelgood.
All right, then. Dr. Feelgood versus Night of the Long Knives from For Those About to Rock, AC/DC's follow-up to Back in Black. It is not just influenced by that song. Motley Crue flat out stole it, note from note, but you be the judge. Okay, and now, Night of the Long Knives, AC/DC.
And I had no idea, and I put those side by side. It's like, oh, wow.
All right. Well, let's move on to another band, a legendary band that was clearly influenced by AC/DC, The Cult. They came out with an album in the late 80s called Electric, which was a fantastic hard rock album, quite a huge departure from Love, the album before it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is like night and day, really.
Right.
Two different
So
bands.
they went out and they got Rick Rubin to produce it. Rick Rubin, who is on record with Rolling Stone magazine saying that he believes AC/DC is the greatest rock and roll band of all time. He walked into the studio with The Cult and he said, and I read that same interview with him where he said, yeah, you know what? I wanted an album that would sound like Highway to Hell by AC/DC. And in terms of production and all of that and sonic power. Well, it's interesting because the song Wildflower on that album, put Wildflower on, and then put on a song from the High Voltage album called Rock and Roll Singer. It is the opening to that song is a note-for-note ripoff.
Once again, it's like, is it influence or are they lifting it? I mean,
Yeah.
it's really interesting when you have bands that almost go note for note, and then obviously change up the lyrics, but when you hear them back to back, it's like, okay, they may be a little more than just influence at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to listen to the two and decide for yourself. Here is Wildflower by The Cult. And this is Rock and Roll Singer from High Voltage by AC/DC. on, man. I mean, that is note for note. But all right, I'll concede that whether it's Rock and Roll Singer and Wildflower, beyond those opening notes, they do go off into their own directions. Dr. Feelgood, Night of the Long Knives, once they get beyond those opening notes, they do go off into their own direction. So they are different songs. Is it influence? Is it a ripoff? Those sections are ripoffs, but the rest of it might be influenced. Who knows?
Well, I think the other ones are definitely more of an influence. It's like they know where their roots are. And I think that's why they sound the way they came out. It's because the influence is so heavy.
So what do you think? Why do you think ACDC has been able to, they start in 73 and here we are in 2019 still talking about them and they're still relevant. I mean, their last album, Rock or Bust, was #1 in 30 plus countries when it came out. So they are still relevant. What do you think it is, though, that here all these years later, we're still talking about them? I mean, what is it about AC/DC that has given them this kind of staying power?
I think that they're true to their sound, and they have never tried to be the flavor of the day. Like, even like in the 90s and the 80s, they still try to sound like AC/DC and not like, hey, we're going to sound like grunge in the 90s, or we're going to sound more like hair metal in the 80s. They, even like with the 80s, and then not their best album, Fly on the Wall.
Yeah.
But that just sounds nothing like the day at all.
That's true.
I mean, it was pretty heavy. I mean, where everything was kind of more of the like Poison type bands and Cinderella. But AC/DC went that step farther to distance themselves from that genre. It's like, hey, we're still a rock and roll band, and we're going to do this like we want to do it.
And they do what they do.
Exactly.
Because whether it's the 70s, the 80s, 90s, whatever, you're right. In the 80s, creatively, it was kind of a weak era for them, but they didn't try to become Poison or Motley Crue or come out with power ballads like everybody else did. They didn't do any of that.
Very good point.
And, image-wise, there's no pictures from them with bleach blonde hair and spandex and crap. There's none of that.
None.
The 90s, they didn't come out with a grunge album. Even Bon Jovi tried to harden up at the first part of the 90s. You remember that?
That's right, they did. Didn't work, but they tried.
It didn't work. They tried. Motley Crue had an album in 94, which I thought was a fantastic album, but it wasn't Motley Crue, but it was very much in line with what the 90s were.
Yes, exactly.
Sort of that grungy kind of feel to it.
Right.
AC/DC never did that. And I would submit that The Razor's Edge in 1990 was a great album. It had Thunderstruck. It sort of brought them back from the malaise of the 80s, from which we all suffered, I think, Mark. And then over the next decade, by 2000 with Stiff Upper Lip, I'd say they're fully back. I mean, they're back to being AC/DC, having never once wavered from who they are. It's like that famous quote with you can find on YouTube with they're interviewing Angus. And they said, Angus goes, we get a lot of criticism that we've made the same album 11 times. He goes, that's not true. We've made the same album 12 times. So,
bottom line is you trust them.
Yeah.
You trust you're going to get a good product, and you know what you're going to get. It's not like a surprise. You know you're going to get straight ahead rock and roll.
That's true. I've always said there's only 2 bands where I will download it, I will buy it without having even heard a single track, because I trust them as AC/DC and Motorhead.
There you go. You know what you're going to get from both bands.
Right. Although the last Motorhead record, somehow Lemmy snuck in a slow one. I'm like, wait a minute.
That's right, he did.
He did. He snuck in a slow Lemmy. All right, you know what? Maybe it was because he knew he was toward the end or something. I don't know. He could feel it cosmically. I have no idea. But it was just like, come on. Really? A slow one?
What's up with that?
But it's Lemmy, so I'm willing to let it go.
Exactly.
And we'll have a whole episode on Lemmy.
We most definitely will.
We definitely
Yes.
will. We should have a whole episode on Lemmy and why people mistakenly call them a metal band when Motorhead is not a metal band.
They're a rock and roll band.
They're a rock and roll band. They've always been a rock and roll band, but that's a different subject for a different episode.
That's right.
All right. But, ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't know that we've even made the case for why AC/DC is so flipping awesome. I guess you just have to go and download their early work, in my opinion.
I agree. And I would start with Powerage is a good one to start with for like Bon Scott, and then kind of move forward.
I think you need 4 albums probably. I think if you had Powerage, maybe not. I think Powerage, Highway to Hell, Back in Black, those 3. will kind of tell you everything you need to know about ACDC.
Yeah, I agreed. And I would sprinkle in there For Those About to Rock. I think that's a pretty dark, heavy album. I love that album a lot.
And as a bonus, you get Night of the Long Knives, which is like getting Dr. Feelgood for free.
Exactly. Bonus.
Now, name another band that can lose their singer as they're on the cusp of stardom. They get another guy, release an album. That album becomes the biggest selling album in the history of rock and roll.
I mean, that is so unheard of. And I mean, on every level. I mean, for one thing, a rock album being that high in the charts for so long, and then with a lead singer that had passed, and you got someone that's totally unheard of.
Yeah, Geordie.
Yeah.
He came from Geordie?
Still don't know what that is.
I don't even. We still don't know. No idea.
Yeah.
Those guys in Geordie. Yeah. But Brian Johnson was the perfect guy.
He was.
Perfect, man. I remember thinking, who are they going to get? And we kept hearing all these names, like the guy from Crocus and whoever. We kept hearing all these names. And even Malcolm later said, we kept getting tapes from all these Bon Scott sound-alikes. But Brian Johnson doesn't sound like Bon, but he does in a way. In some way, he's got that quality that Bon had, but it's different.
That's a good way to put it. I mean, it's you can, even when he does the Bond songs, they sound really good. Mm-hmm. So he has the quality, but he still has his own voice.
Brian is every bit of AC/DC as Bon is, and it's funny because Bon was only there for 7 years, but he was like, it might as well have been 30.
Those albums he put out were, I mean, every one was, fantastic. There's not one bad one in the batch.
I'm so old, I've seen him 3 times. I'm telling you, Bon Scott was incredible. He come out with no shirt, those dad jeans from the 70s, the bell bottoms.
Those are great.
And his sneakers. And he would, I don't know, it's really hard to describe because I was always I always finagled my way into the front. I was really good at that back in the day. And he just, I don't know, there was something about that guy, the charisma and the power. I can't quite describe, nothing I could say would adequately describe it.
Well, getting ready for the show, I had last week watched for, I'm not sure, 25th time, Let There Be Rock again. That is such a great movie. The first time I saw it was at the Midnight Movie back in the 80s. And just seeing Bon and his connection with the audience and also with the whole band and backward before they were, made that leap to like superstardom, it was really cool watching.
Yeah. Well, if you want to know, and I saw that tour, that was Highway to Hell tour. And if you want to know, and I think besides those albums that we listed earlier, I think if you really want to know why AC/DC is esteemed, why we believe they're the band that has set the bar for every band that followed, get a copy of the concert film Let There Be Rock, which was released in 1980. It was released as a tribute to Bon from their Highway to Hell tour. That is the concert film that made Dave Grohl decide to become a rock and roller. And it is the one that will tell you why AC/DC is a band that matters.
Most definitely, yes.
AC/DC, though, if the rumors are true, Mark, they've got an album coming out. Allegedly, last year, they spent time in a studio in Vancouver with Brian. August?
Yes.
Brian, Cliff, Phil, Angus, and Stevie. I mean, I don't know if this is true. Allegedly, it's an album of that they're doing as a tribute to Malcolm of songs that he wrote before he died.
How cool would that be? That would be the ultimate.
That would be, because to me, that last tour is like, that was their swan song. But if they came out with an album as a tribute to Malcolm, what do you call it? Back in Black 2? I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I mean, what do you call it? I don't even know. Who has ever had a sequel to a tribute album for a band member who died? AC/DC would be the first.
That's true. That's true. So I'm hoping that we see that sees the light of day, hopefully by maybe the end of the year.
I hope so. Yeah. That would be flipping great. Look, AC/DC is a live touring act to me. It's like, let's call it a day. But how cool would it be if Angus Young went out and played like clubs at hell, a couple thousand people maybe, with like all-star band, and they just played songs he wanted to play?
Yeah, that would be, at this point in the career, that might be the way to go.
You know what? To me, AC/DC's legacy is set. They're legends. It's set in stone, and Angus, buddy, you do nothing but endanger that by dragging guys on the road like Axl or whatever. I mean, Axl did a fantastic job for them, but I don't know. I think AC/DC is done. If Cliff is done touring, if Brian's done touring, if Phil can't tour because he legally can't travel from country to country,
that's an issue right there.
They're done.
Yeah, I agree. And you go out on a high note. I think would be the best way to do it.
So to summarize, go and get Highway to Hell, Powerage, Back in Black. Get the movie Let There Be Rock, and let's hope that a new album comes out as a tribute to Malcolm.
Done, done, and done.
Done, done, and done. And that's everything you need to know about why Justin Bieber matters. No.
That will never happen.
Hey, guys, can't tell you how much we appreciate the fact that you guys took a few minutes to listen to Mark and me. That's it for us. I'm Dave Erickson. Thanks so much for tuning in.
I'm Mark Anderson.
Let there be rock.
See you next time.
You've been listening to Mark Anderson and Dave Erickson's Let There Be Rock podcast.
Awesome.
Mark and Dave's opinions are theirs, and not necessarily those of whoever runs whatever platform on which you're listening. But if you don't agree with them, you probably listen to Justin Bieber.
What an idiot.
Let There Be Rock is an Anderson Erickson production.
Rock and roll!
Well, it's one louder.